So I said, okay, what's a triangle, Dad? He said, well, it's the way that a dog will react.
Dogs and high school dating. I know how are these two related?
Some say these two trainers were quietly in the shadows. Robert Weatherwax, last of the legendary Lassie trainers, from the world's greatest movie dog training family, was quietly hidden in his TV work. And Christophe Clugston, elite action K9 trainer, was traveling from the sub-zero Arctic to the sweltering jungle heat, training dogs on 3 continents. But a chance meeting changed all of that. Now, Robert and Christophe have joined forces and they're breaking the silence. For the first time, the secretive and hidden world of the movie dog trainer and the science of the elite tactical trainer will be revealed. That's right, they are out of the shadows. Welcome to Tactical Practical.
This episode we're talking about reactivity. This is something that a lot of people have questions about, and we're going to discuss some aspects about dog reactivity and to set it up and to start out with the foundation of reactions and the big triangle, as he calls it. Robert's going to take it away and give us the big lowdown on it. So go ahead.
Okay, well, thanks, Christophe. I just wanted to kind of delve into something that I've been working on as a second training book. Obviously, I have the first training book, Training Your Dog the Weatherwax Way, and I definitely talk about reactivity with certain types of dogs, the soft dogs and the spooky dogs. But my dad was the one who told me about the triangle initially, and I never heard Rudd talk about it, but somewhere along the road, my dad picked this up and relayed it to me. And one of the few things he actually said, listen, I want you to know about this. Most of the time he said, figure it out, but this time he said, I want you to know about the triangle. So I said, okay, what's a triangle, Dad? He said, well, it's the way that a dog will react. It's like a triangle. There's one of 3 ways that a dog will react when they're cornered, when they're in a situation where they have no exit. And that is they will either submit, they will cower, or they'll try to escape, or they'll fight back. And that's where fear aggression comes from. I mean, a lot of people look at aggression in itself as something evil and something that the dog is doing intentionally, but it's actually very instinctive, and it comes over time when they're rewarded for activity that isn't protective. People don't even notice they're doing it. A lot of my clients will be petting their dog when they're growling, thinking that comforting the dog will actually make them feel better. But no, it will actually be confirming their fear. It will be telling them that, yes, why are you comforting me so much? There must be something wrong, right? That's what a dog does. That's the way a dog thinks. And a lot of times we confirm those thoughts that they have when we could be changing those thoughts into something more positive. For example, when somebody comes into a house for dog training, like me, and what last thing I want to do is have the owner, the one that the dog's very attached to, doing a lot of talking to the dog, because now they're having to accept a new person, me, maybe a guest, maybe a relative, whatever it may be, and we have to change the balance. We have to change all the focus from being with the owner, protecting the owner, to accepting the person who's coming into the house. And that only happens by taking the positive away from the owner and giving it to the new person. That can represent food, that can represent toys, it can represent nothing at all. Sometimes nothing at all is the best thing to do when you walk into a house with a dog that you don't know. Because I've seen many dogs that have been biting other people, according to the owner. But when I walk in, they just come up to me and they check me out. Because when I come into the door, I typically don't advance beyond the inside of the door once I'm inside the house until the dog has checked me out. Most of the time when you're seeing reactivity as far as aggression, it normally happens from a dog from behind. Cattle dogs are famous for it. That's what they do, right? They'll be nipping your ankle as you're going by because you didn't give them the time of day. You just walked into their house. You didn't think, oh, this is this dog's house too. You didn't really take the dog into consideration. And whenever you don't do that, you're setting yourself up for problems with the dog. Now that's really just the fear part of it. But I'll get into the other 2 parts of the triangle once I give it back to you, Christophe, and see what you can bring to the table on the fear-aggressive dogs.
Yeah, okay. There's a lot of, we could talk again, like I always say, we could talk hours on this and not do it complete justice. but we want to try to hit some aspects that other people haven't really talked about when they talk about this, or dispel some of the myths. Because again, I got to say that we've got 100 years of experience with the two of us added together, with a lot of dogs and a lot of places in the world. And with that, talking about the fear aggression, this is something where, again, people confuse this and they say, oh, the dog is aggressive, the dog is attacking. No, the dog is defending. And this is most 98% of all dogs, when people tell me that, like, oh, though this dog is aggressive. No, the dog is defensive, just like you would be too if you're scared. And you have people say, hey, I shot that guy because I feared for my life. And, it's called defense in the United States. And people do that because why? Because they're fearful. My big point is because they're fearful. And the same thing with the dogs. Dogs are reacting this way. And Robert brought up a good point, is especially with dogs you don't know, you should not be trying to sneak up from behind or approach them from the side even. This is something that dogs do to show dominance. It's called teeing up, where one dog will come on the side of the dog to try to show dominance, and usually you'll see them try to put their head over the top of the other dog's back or shoulder. This is complete dominance, and this is also a test to see if they can get away with it. But when dogs are face to face, this is when they're showing each other more respect, and that's when you'll see the play bow usually happen from that position, when they're really okay with each other. But this is also something that you got to be aware of with the fear aggression, that it happens from the dogs adopting certain postures, as it were. And again, the thing that I want to say, for giving it back to you, Robert, is that you really need to start studying the dog psychology, and especially the psychology of the dog that you live with, or the dogs that you have, or the dog that you're going to get, because this is the best way. As we've talked about many times, reading a dog is vitally important, and this is something where the reactions, you can step in before it escalates, or before it actually happens. We want to de-escalate or throw a wrench in the works so it doesn't happen. This is especially with fear aggression, and this is a process. I can't say here's the cooking ingredients, put them in this order, and this is going to handle, because each individual dog is going to show a different pattern to what triggers them and what also gives them relief from this. And anyway, without going into another hour and a half and going off on some other tangents, to Robert, let's get on with your triangle, or add to this part, whatever you feel like doing.
Well, I'll just the practical part. I'll just talk about the practicality of the situation. The situation where you're at home and somebody comes to your door. The dog's reacting to the door, first of all. Maybe they've even reacted to the person getting out of their car. So it's a process where one reactivity leads to the next. So first it's the car door slamming, then it's the feet walking towards the door, then it's the knock at the door. These are all junctures of reactivity. So a lot of times you have to choose your battle, what reactivity you're willing to deal with. And of course, when the person gets in the house, the thing I always want the client to do, and of course, if somebody's in the house and the dog's a little sketchy to begin with, we always want to make sure that the client has the dog on leash before that person enters the house. Because if that person enters the house and the dog's not on leash, then you have no control. The dog might just dart over and bite somebody who's unaware or in the wrong position as far as in relation to them and the dog. So you have to be very careful about new people and have the dog on leash if your dog has a history of going after people or threatening or biting. It's just a safety precaution. Of course, I use a training leash too. You could use a regular short leash with a chain collar or whatever type of training collar you use. And the goal is to get that leash into the other person's hand. When they're spending so much time worrying about this person, it seems to change the dynamic when that person gets a leash. Of course, that could take time as far as getting them to a point where they're indifferent about the person's presence, either in the room or in the yard. It's best to meet on neutral territory, as we've covered in previous episodes, but You can't always create that when you have a party and people are coming to the house, or just for whatever reason they come unexpectedly, and you want to be in a position, which I tell people a lot of times, which is why I tell my clients, hey, when a dog's in training, even when he's not in training in your home, put the leash and collar, the training collar on, so that if something comes up, you're in a position to correct the collar and not by touching the dog, which is sending the wrong message. So I could go on for days and days about fear aggression, but I'm going to go into the other two parts of the triangle, which is that soft dog we're talking about, that dog that literally cowers when you walk over to pet him. Maybe there's been some abuse, something that's occurred with the dog at some point, and he's remembering that, or maybe you remind him of somebody. There's so many reasons why a dog will react a certain way. Most of the time it's because it's a memory. It's because whatever has worked for them in the past, being submissive or fighting back, whatever works for the dog tends to be what they end up doing later. So let's take that submissive dog. You know the dog when you reach down to pet him and he piddles a little bit on the floor because you reached over the top of him. Once again, the leash and the collar ahead of time is always going to give the dog more comfort. It gives them a feeling of structure, that they belong. So when somebody reaches in, they shouldn't be reaching in over the dog. They should be reaching in from under the dog, or parallel to the dog in height, which means they have to get down, or they have to grab the leash and just hold it. Let the dog just get used to you holding the leash. Don't try to pull the dog into you. All you want to do is get the dog used to your presence, and then it's an incremental kind of thing where you slide over a little bit, and then you put your hand nearby, but you don't touch the dog. You just it's like a first date. You don't just go in and grab them and kiss them. You gotta kind of work your way in there. And that's kind of what you have to do with that soft, submissive dog. You can't just come in like a bull in a china shop. You could drive them away, or they're going to bite you, which could happen on the date too. If you get too aggressive, you might get slapped, or they might just run out of the car. So you got to be careful with that dog. You're trying to make an impression that they're going to remember about you in particular. First impressions are everything, and it's no different when it comes to dog training. You have to, really set a good first impression. Set an expectation that the dog can rely on, because in the past they've not been able to rely on anything, and now here you are being unpredictable. Don't be unpredictable. Be smooth. Be calm, and be comforting, because that's really like the ingredients to turning that fear reactive kind of dog. Wouldn't you agree, Christophe?
Yeah, I knew. I got to say this. I knew that you were going to go to the dating thing. I was thinking about that immediately. I was especially thinking about like the high school dating thing that just came to me. It's like, yeah, this dogs in high school dating. I know how are these two related? Well, stick with us and you'll find out. There's a lot of what we're talking about right here, though, is the past history of the dog. And again, this is why when we talk about rescue dogs or shelter dogs, which are pound dogs, it's just a new name, right? Just to come with a new name doesn't change the fact that they're in the pound. These are dogs in the pound. They have, as we talked about in some other episodes, they're having some emotional baggage come with them. They have history, just like we do. We have history and their reactions. And of course, dogs will do this is Thorndike's law, by the way. If you're looking at psychology, they're going to do what has paid off for them in the past. So if it's worked for them, the strategy of being aggressive has worked, then they'll use that. If they've been by cowering and being submissive, then they'll use that. Just like people do, you'll find that, especially with used car salesmen. They'll stick to their same strategy. They'll use their same strategies quite a bit. But I point this out because the study, again, we're talking about psychology. This is about the psychology of a dog. And all these reactions, of course, are psychological reactions that manifest themselves in physical behavior. We're not saying this is the only reason why this stuff can happen, but the one instance that we talk about, there's more examples from different ways, but these big categories that we're talking about with the fear or the cowering or the submission. And there are dogs who will urinate as a complete sign of submission. And then people get mad and they think the dog is spiting them. This is something we really need to cover many, many times. We've said it in some other podcasts, but the dogs are not against you. They're not doing something out of spite. They're not planning. They didn't plan. The dog pissed on my floor. He planned to do that. People think like that because they're projecting themselves. Something they did. Maybe that was your Uncle Henry at the birthday party. He might have done that, but the dog didn't have a plan to do that. So there's many things where the dog is not doing something that is nefarious or bad. This is the reaction of the dog because of his emotions. Emotionally, the dog can't cope and he doesn't know what to do, and the dog wants to show that he or she is completely submissive, and that this dog ends up urinating because the dog is so scared. You can see it, the shaking of the dog body, and the nervousness, and the wide-eyed dog. The pupils are big. All of these things are indications that the dog's physiological state is changed because of the psychology of the dog. This is incredibly important. So all these reactions that you'll have because of a situation, they're all triggered by the situation, triggering something in the memory of the dog, the past history of the dog. All of these things together lead to the physical part that we're talking about as far as the dogs having a problem with the people, and that people misreading it. This is really we want to try to get across, is that a lot of times people are misreading what the dog is doing. Like I'm talking about, it's not out of spite, it's not out of anger. The dog is doing this because the dog wants relief from the pressure that the dog is feeling, whether that be I'm scared, I'm fearful, so get away from me. That's why the barking is an indication telling the dog is telling you, get away from me. I don't want it. Don't come near. Don't come closer. It's too much. It's fearful. Or if the dog is urinating on the floor, showing submission is the way to saying, I've given up as much as I possibly can. What else can I do? What can I do? Acknowledge my submission. And humans, of course, don't know how to react to that. And like I said, a lot of times people get angry. Oh, the dog! And they want to get violent with the dog. Wrong thing. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't abuse your dogs. Don't do anything horrible with your dogs. Anyway, Robert, where do you want to go from there?
Well, I mean, obviously, we were talking more about the dog, the cowering dog. I was talking about the cowering dog, but that cowering dog can become a dog that bites if you invade their territory, which is what Christophe was talking about. That can transition into a different part of the triangle, right? But there's also the dog that wants to escape. That happens a lot, where dogs just take off because they don't know how to deal with the situation. They panic. They run out in the street, get hit by a car. Whatever it is, that's why exposure is so important with these dogs. And of course, talking about the dog that is skittish as opposed to soft, because I look at a dog that cowers to be a soft dog, and a dog that tries to escape to be a skittish dog. When we're talking about a skittish dog, I'm thinking that obviously, once again, we have to have the leash and collar on the dog already, because that's the only way. And we have to give them slack. We have to, whatever length of leash you're working with a dog like this, you have to give them slack. You can't make them feel like they don't have any control, like they can't see what's around them, or walk a few feet this way, or walk a few feet that way. So typically, I'll take a dog like that out in the street and have the long leash. And the whole reason is I don't want to put any rules on a dog that's already very nervous, flight ready at any moment. I want the dog to feel comfortable, so they don't feel like there's any need to just take off and do something stupid. Whether it's the fear-aggressive dog that fights back, the dog that submits and cowers and pees all over the floor, or the dog that is going to run away, you have to make them feel comfortable. You have to make them feel that there isn't any pressure being put on them. Because what happens is, when you take the pressure off the dog, then they begin to be more willing to do things that you ask of them, as opposed to constantly living for the moment of resistance to whatever you want them to do. And it happens when you put too much pressure on a dog. that has already probably had too much pressure put on them at an early age, and they weren't really able to process it. So now it becomes like a flashback, right? Something that they experienced before, a sound, a voice, a situation. It's amazing the imprint that situations have on dogs. Whether it was they almost got hit by a car and now they're always afraid of cars, whatever it is, they develop a fear and it just gets imprinted if you don't erase it. My dad said something very, I thought was comical when I was a kid. He said, "You know the difference between a person and a dog, Robbie?" And I said, "Well, what, Dad?" And he says, "Well, when a person runs into a chair, they think, what idiot put that chair there, right? But when a dog runs into a chair, they think, oh, chairs, bad, stay away from them." And I think that's a real simple rule when you look at dogs. It's all cause and effect. What caused the dog to act that way? And that a lot of times when I look at the behavior, when I go to somebody's home and they have a disturbed dog, I typically can start seeing situations that they probably endured. I mean, I can't hit it on the head, but I could tell you pretty closely that I have about 2 or 3 scenarios in my head that the dog endured that created this behavior. And you can't blame yourself as an owner if you had a dog that's been rehomed once or twice, whatever it may be. You're not. All you're going to do, you're setting a new example for your dog. You're trying to get them to forget what they endured before you, so you can't take the blame for that. All you can do is work through it and create a new memory for the dog, because you're not like the people that owned them before. This is a new beginning for your dog, and it's a new beginning for you. So work with your dog to get them over their fears, because that's why dogs are so good at helping us get over our fears and making us feel comfortable, because it's a team effort. We do it for one another. Wouldn't you agree, Christophe?
Yeah, and this reminds me, of course, of many aspects here. And this is the fact that you're trying to prove that the dog is accepted, into the situation, and the dog is okay as the dog is. That the dog doesn't have to be, he doesn't have to change. I mean, at the core level, and you accept that the dog has these qualities, and then you will work at it to resolve it. And this goes into, Robert's talking about, goes into Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and you can look it up, and a lot of people probably studied it. But if the dog is scared at a fundamental level, you cannot give the dog information, because it's too busy worrying about surviving. And in that moment, we're talking about in that moment. We're not talking about planning ahead, a year or something. Like people, I don't have money for this in the future. No, we're talking about the immediate moment. Same thing with people. If the most important thing to them is survival in the moment, and then finding shelter. And that's the same thing. The dog wants to have a safe place. We've talked about this before, but all of this is tied together, and you need to know this. Is one of the things that we're sharing over these 100 years of experience. Is that Robert's going to a place and working with clients, because that's his deal. That's what he does. I mean, he's working with this part of the dog spectrum, and it's about getting the people to create a safe environment for the dog, so that the dog feels that, and also getting the human to accept what the dog is doing, but also for the dog to accept the structure. Hopefully that's what he's instilling. I think he'll tell you that's one of the big things. He's trying to get them to instill a structure so the dog will feel safe and secure, because dogs, canines, like structure. They like to be able to count on things happening a certain way, and this is how it is. This is my house. This is my territory. This is my place. This is where I get to go. And Robert was saying that's why he doesn't enter into the house all the way, because he's respecting the dog. They're respecting the dog and allowing the dog to come up and say, oh, okay, I checked this guy out. He's okay. He's not doing, because Robert's not doing anything stupid. And he said something else I want to get back to too. And he was talking about, you want to lower yourself down, because you don't want to be this imposing giant. And reaching over a dog, this is one of the things I have a thing why I don't like kids. This is where we have a difference. I do not like mixing kids with dogs. because kids act like little primates and they do primate things, and that and canine behavior do not mix. The coming running at the dog and then trying to pat the dog hard on top of the head is aggression. To a canine is aggression, and then they wonder why they get bit, because the dog is on defense. If I run towards your kid and start trying to do this to your kid, you're going to get crazy, right? Oh, but why did you do that? You overreacted. Well, you got to be smarter than that. And Robert was talking about getting underneath. That's the same thing. You should not pat the dog. I don't know where this came from, patting the dog. You should be underneath the chin. It honors the dog's respect. Anyway, I wanted to throw that stuff in there, giving people more tidbits about little things that they should know about. But anyway, so like I said, there's a lot of things that we're going off into the briar patch again with the details. But I think they're important, because you got to understand your dog better, and that's what we're trying to do with every podcast. We're trying to have you learn more about your dog by listening to us and learning from the things that we've gone through. And anyway, Robert, back to you on this, wherever you want to go with it at this point.
Yeah, dog training is a big circle. Dog training is basically a big circle. I mean, it all comes around back to the beginning again. It's like when we have the leash and collar on. You talked about structure. Structure is the leash and the collar. Structure is that mark, that area where they can go, where they can feel safe. Structure is the crate. Structure is the puppy pen. Structure is the backyard. Structure is eating 3 times a day. These are all things that a dog should come to expect. In the dog's life, a dog that's been rehomed, there was no consistency. Sometimes they ate once a day, sometimes they didn't eat at all. Who knows what happened, right? We don't know. We can only speculate, but all you can do is the best job that you can do now, because over time, all those things, especially a younger dog, is going to be able to reform that memory quicker than an older dog. It's all, a 5-year-old dog will change slower than a 2-year-old dog, and a 9-year-old dog won't change as fast as a 5-year-old dog, in most cases. But just keep in mind that the younger the dog, typically the quicker the results you can expect as far as their behavior modification. But with older dogs, it can take longer. But I don't believe in that saying that you can't teach an old dog new tricks, because you can. And that's why there's so many older dogs in shelters. We want to get those dogs homes as well, not just the young athletic dogs that are cute. We want homes for all the dogs. And those dogs that are too much to handle as a young dog, sometimes a senior dog can really provide more of the level of exertion you're able to put out with your dog. Sometimes an older dog can be a really good choice as opposed to a younger dog that might be harder to handle. It really have to think about, all the whole spectrum. And when I talked about that mark, when I have people in the house, people that the dog's not sure about, like for example, I have a client who has some workers coming into the house Tuesday, and they want me to go there when the workers come. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is the dog's going to be barking, so I'm going to have to create some kind of distraction there. But I'm also going to have to put the dog in an area that he can call his while he's being invaded by these people, right? With tools and belts and bags and all kinds of stuff. It looks like the invasion of Normandy to the dog, right? I just want to make sure that he knows that he's going to be safe on that patch of beach. That's what a dog needs to have, is they need to have the security of knowing you have to create, a fortress for your dog. Build some walls around your dog that make them feel protective. And when I say walls, I'm not talking about brick walls. I'm talking about geographical walls, so that they can, enjoy peace within their country. Even if the next country is hostile, they know that in their country things are safe. They have a stable government there. That government is you, right? Stable government, you and your dog. So create a stable life and a stable government for your dog, and he will follow you forever.
Safe haven. You want to create a safe haven for the dog. The dog has to feel it, not just you saying it. It's right. About the dog has to feel the safe haven. But I want to say something, and I'm throwing this in there as a freebie on top of everything else that we're doing, because I think it's vitally important, because Robert has talked about eliminating some of the bad history that the dog has gone through. And of course, if the dog is older, has had more history, so it's going to take longer, of course. But one of the things that I've done, because I have a bunch of, you want to call them rescues, I pull them away from being killed. I mean, some of them literally at 2 hours. One of my dogs was going to get killed in 2 hours. One of the dogs, they said, oh, we were supposed to, they used other terms, but it meant they were supposed to kill this dog a week ago. And I went crazy. But I had the dog. So my going crazy worked. Anyway, I want to, and this is the thing, is like the dog, you might get a dog from somewhere that's had this bad history, and they say, oh, this dog's name is whatever, Fred or something, change that name, because this is, change that name. Changing the name gives the dog a new identity that you can create. This is one of the things. If you go into witness protection program, they're going to change your name. They're not going to do it. It's Robert and I've talked about the power of a name many times, not in the podcast, but other times. Don't you agree? Do you agree with that, Robert? Change the name of the dog. That this is key.
Yeah. I mean, that's all part of the memory. I didn't even read. It wasn't at the top of my thoughts, but it's definitely part of the whole spectrum. Being able to set a new foundation for the dog, and there's nothing wrong with changing a name. A lot of times you get a dog who's got this really stupid name, and you think, I don't even like this name. Yeah. You can change it. You're moving into a new home. They're leaving this other place. Give them a new name. It's not a problem, because now you're just not going to use the other name anymore, and you can start. At first, you want to combine the names. So maybe his name was Fido, and now you're naming him Spot. So you'll say Fido Spot. You'll just put more emphasis on Spot, and then you just eliminate Fido. And then eventually, you're rewarding them only for the new name, not for the old name. You're acting like the old name never existed ever. Nothing that they ever experienced before is going to be experienced here, because this is a new home, new situation, new foundation, and you can expect that everything's going to be different, but in a good way. That's why it's good to know the background of your dog, because you want to know what situations you can put them in to reform their memories. Like, people will say to me, Robert, my dog not really good with people. I'm like, oh, that's great. So we're going to go to Lowe's, right? We're going to go to Lowe's, and we're going to see a lot of people, and every time they see a person, we're going to give them a different memory. That could be food, it could be a toy, whatever it is, they respond to under stress. And sometimes praise is the only thing you can do. But you're never going to praise the bad behavior. You're going to praise the bad behavior that has now subsequently stopped. Now you can praise the dog when they're calm. As soon as they get excited, oh, you're not my dog anymore. You want to eliminate any contact when the dog is reacting to duress. You want to just, you're not my dog. You're not mad at them, but you're not going to make contact with them when they're growling at somebody. The worst thing you can do is touch a dog when they're growling. You want to act like they just passed gas, and you want to step away. That's why a long leash is good, because now you can step away. You don't have to pull the dog with you and make it feel like you're trying to protect them from something. So you have to use whatever you can use to get them to start looking at people in a different way, so that if every time, I've had dogs where they used to want to bite other people, but I'd give them a little a distraction, and then when they'd respond to my distraction, I'd pay them. So over time, what would happen, instead of wanting to bite the person, whenever they see the person they want to bite, they look back at me, expecting the reward, the cessation of that activity. So they remember, and they learn quick that way. You just have to give them a reason to want to do it. Force isn't the reason. Force is a way to resolve something that can't be resolved in any other way. That's not the first option. Inducement is what I call it in my book. You get a lot more flies with honey than you do with vinegar, and that's the way that I train. But there are some times when you might have to use some vinegar, but it's like, not plan A, it's not plan B, it's not even plan C, right? But it's somewhere down the alphabet, way down there when everything else has failed. So always try the easiest course to training your dog, and especially when you're working with a lot of subpar, quote unquote, spooky, soft dogs like I've worked a lot with in my lifetime, and collies, which tend to be soft, is that you have to, less is more, basically. You have to use less force and more praise. That teeter-totter that I talked about, that Carl Miller talked about, correction, balancing correction with affection. You have to be balanced. You have to not just acknowledge the bad things that your dog does, but also give great praise to the good things they do or don't do, right? Because they'll remember, hey, I wasn't barking and I got food. I wasn't growling and I got food. That's what the dog's going to remember, because they don't think the way we do. They don't rationalize. They don't try to figure out who put the chair there. They just accept the chair for where it is. And until you move it in front of your dog, that's where the chair is always going to be. Wouldn't you agree, Christophe?
Well, it's the Zen. The dogs are more Zen-like than people who try to spend 10 years trying to become Zen-like. And they're accepting the now. They're accepting the now, and they're also accepting the reality of what is, and not what they want it to be, which is where we're going now. But we're getting a little this is something we could talk about another time, or with people who would like, if they want to call us up, do consultation or something on that nature, that we'll go on this. But there's a lot to it. It's pretty profound. I mean, yeah, dog training. How can dogs and Zen and philosophy? It's all together. It's that circle, as Robert talked about before. You'll see the circle, but there's a lot of circles. It's not just one circle. That's the thing. That's where it's like the multiverse of circles. So I don't want people to get thrown here, but I think that we've introduced a lot of concepts, a lot of new ideas about reactivity and why it happens, and to approach it from the dog's point of view, not just your point of view. And don't you just react to the dog. That's something too that I want to say without going on to another hour or so. But a lot of people react to the dog's reaction. You've got to be the stoic one here, and you've got to be the one with the big frontal cortex. You're supposed to be the incredible thinking mammal, right? Well, then use it. Don't react out of a knee-jerk sort of behavior. Don't just say, the dog doesn't do this, dog doesn't do that, he doesn't like me, he doesn't do this, or he's spiting me, or stupid dog, or whatever. Use it to think about, hey, how can I use this information, because that's what it is. It's information, a situation, an event, an experience that you can use for another time, and to help you with your, like Robert was saying, like we've said in all these podcasts, it's about forming that better connection relationship with your dog at the end of the day. It's about that. And there's a lot of ways to that, and there's a lot of things that people want to cure, want to do, and that's why we're here talking about it. But that's what I got to say for this episode. Robert, what do you got to say? What do you got to say? Besides that, you need to do dating and passing gas.
I'll just go out with one story I like to tell. Well, I always like to use this story with people as well when their dog doesn't want to come, for example, or doesn't want to do what you want them to do. They're in the yard with the ball and they don't want to come in the house. That's when I typically, just like I'd say, remember when you had kids and they didn't want to leave the playground, and they were like, no, I want to play 10 more minutes. And no, you got to go. We got to go now. Please go. Let's go now. And the kid becomes more defiant, right? Because you're begging him, please, come with me. But what you should do, and I'm sure a lot of parents have already done this, is just take those keys, go jingle, jingle. I'm leaving. Here I go. They're walking towards the car. I don't care about you. I'm going to leave you behind. And here they come running. Oh, Mom, I thought you were going to leave me. What's going on? It's like, I told you we were going to leave. And when I say I'm going to leave, I'm going to leave. It's not negotiable. We don't negotiate with dogs. We just say, okay, there's the fire. You sit right here. You're afraid of fire. Watch the fire. And eventually they'll be like, oh, I watch fire every day. Who cares? Nobody cares about a car crash, if you saw one 3 times a day for a year. A car crash wouldn't seem like anything. And that's the way you got to look at things with your dogs. Whatever doesn't kill them makes them stronger.
Well, yeah, I could add something to that. I have that Friedrich Nietzsche quote. I have something else to that they forget to say about that, but I would save that for another time. Anyway, so here at the end, people, you should know how to contact us by now. If you don't, you need to read underneath the video, and you also go to the website.